there's an article in The Guardian, which, look, in a world that made sense, this would be like a bombshell story, but the world doesn't make sense, so it's not really that much of a bombshell story. In fact, when I brought it up before the show to you, you were like, I didn't even see that.
Correct.
Which is like, okay, well, that's a failure of all of the mainstream outlets, because again, this is a big deal, and you're going to find out just how big of a deal it is in a second. So this is in The Guardian. They say, revealed the shocking levels of toxic lead in Chicago tap water. So they're going to give us some numbers here. The numbers are out of this world. Tests performed for thousands of Chicago residents found lead, a neurotoxin, in amounts far exceeding the federal standards. 1 in 20 tap water tests performed for thousands of Chicago residents found lead, a neurotoxin, at or above U.S. government limits, according to a Guardian analysis of a City of Chicago data trove. And 1/3 had more lead than is permitted in bottled water. This means that out of the 24,000 tests, approximately 1,000 homes had lead exceeding federal standards. Experts and locals say these results raise broader concerns because there are an estimated 400,000 lead pipes supplying water to homes in the city, and the vast majority were not tested as part of the program. So they did like a little sample, and they're like, yeah, this isn't good. But then when you realize 400,000 lead pipes.
This may just be scratching the surface.
Yeah, so like what? We're poisoning the entire city of Chicago because we, refuse to do sufficient updates to our infrastructure. That's effectively what's going on here.
Wow.
Now, I want to give you some more. Moreover, they say the city is not moving fast enough to eliminate the potential danger. The Guardian worked with water engineer Elin Batanzo, who helped uncover the Flint water crisis that resulted in many, mostly black residents being poisoned by lead in the Michigan city, to review the test results of water tests conducted for Chicago residents between 2016 and 2021. Chicago itself has never released an analysis of the results, and they go on to say the analysis found that 9 of the top 10 zip codes with the largest percentages of high test results were neighborhoods with majorities of black and Hispanic residents, and there were dozens of homes with shockingly high lead levels. One home in the majority black neighborhood of South Chicago had lead levels of 1,100 parts per billion, 73 times the Environmental Protection Agency limit of 15 parts per billion.
Wow.
So it's like kind of like we're just mass poisoning.
Wow.
Chicago, because they're not updating it. And look, when you really stop and think about it, what happened with the Flint water crisis, as Jordan Sheridan has been covering in depth for years and years and years now, it's not even just like shocking levels of incompetence. It crosses the line into being malicious at certain points when like they know they need to do something about it. They don't do something about it. Same thing with the Jackson situation in Mississippi, where they knew, like, okay, we're on borrowed time and this thing is going to go. And then eventually it went. And then it's just, I don't know, what are we going to do? And it's crazy that the stuff that we view as an emergency, do something now, versus the stuff that we're just like, meh, what are you going to do? And I mean, the best example is, of course, we've given over $30 billion to Ukraine. Everything was approved like that in a bipartisan fashion because they view it as this is a necessity because we want to stop the spread of Russia and we want to nip that in the bud. And on the one hand, you understand that, but on the other hand, it's like, is there nothing domestically for like regular people that's the same level of urgency? Like, oh, we got to do something.
Right. I mean, you think about Flint, which was actually in a lot of ways malicious and nefarious from the beginning, because this even came from, a bunch of like people who wanted to profit off of a new water cell. I mean, I won't get into all the backstory and details, but then you have the cover up of after they knew they were poisoning the city and they still try to hide it and try to pretend like nothing's going on. So you have Flint. Now we've just been covering and learning about Jackson, where, again, they've known for years that they have a massive issue with this water system. The state of Mississippi just got a whole bunch of money with the infrastructure project, and they have done absolutely nothing to make sure that their capital city, the largest city in the state, has drinkable water or water at all. Why? Because it's largely a city of poor black people. And now you have Chicago. You could also add to that list a lot of other places, including a lot of places in West Virginia and Appalachia that get similarly neglected. So there's a lot to say about this. I mean, the biggest thing that I always think of is it really shows you who matters in society, who people, who elites care about and who they don't. That's number one. Number two, you do wonder, is this just scratching the surface? I mean, we happen to know now something about Chicago that we didn't know before. How many other places, how many other cities have failing water systems that are literally poisoning their kids and their residents as we speak? And just to be clear, there is no safe level of lead to have in your drinking water, and the effects oftentimes are irreversible. So once you have been poisoned by lead, you are likely to have impacts from that your entire life, which is something that people of Flint continue to struggle and grapple with. And then you have to think about also the fact that, like, what a just core sign of rot, decay, and failure in a wealthy nation that we have so many people across the country that can't even rely on the very basics of safe drinking water. It is truly insane.
To your point on lead, I don't know how many of our audience remember this, but when we were kids, certainly, there was leaded and unleaded gasoline. And then there was this big story that came out. Apparently, this was studied for an extensive period, and they found out that there was a direct connection between, in areas where there was a lot of leaded gasoline that was being emitted and it was in the environment, crime levels spiked through the roof. Now, you can make a causation correlation argument, but as soon as they cracked down on it and regulated it and got rid of the leaded gasoline, those crime rates plummeted. So, it has neurological impacts,
yes,
which in turn leads to psychological impacts, which is something you don't really think about when you think about environmental issues. But I mean, on the one hand, it kind of makes sense because it's like, we are part of nature. So if you change the ingredients of the recipe, then, perhaps you can do things like tweak behavior. I just wanted to say, I went back in my own archive on Secular Talk on YouTube because I know I feel like I covered a story that said, like, the exact percentage that it's estimated that doesn't have clean water in the U.S. I can't find that story, but listen to this. So from 2020, under Trump, the EPA to allow lead mercury toxic discharge from coal plants into drinking water. That was a report from September 5th, 2020. Wow. And then also, listen to this, 2018, bombshell, 70% of Chicago water tainted with toxic lead. So this is just like a follow-up to that story.
Wow.
It's crazy. Now, I did want to make a comparison real quick to put everything in perspective for everybody. So, I mean, when you stop and think about it, again, this is just lead pipes. It's just, hey, we don't want to update it. We don't want to spend the money. We don't want to do what's necessary to keep everybody safe. Compare this to, for example, the ultimate size of the bank bailouts that we did after the 2008 crash. You want to guess the number? Don't look.
I already looked.
No, you did. Okay. It's $29 trillion was the total amount that we bailed out the banks. $29 trillion. Here's another one for you. The Pentagon has a $35 trillion accounting black hole. And again, this is like nobody talks about this,
right.
but we can't get clean water in Chicago, which, by the way, all in, if you were to try to fix that, what's going to be a couple $2 billion?
Yeah,
we're talking about trillions for this shit.
The mayor of Jackson said that he thought it would be $1 billion to fix the Jackson water system. And on the one hand, you're like, holy shit, where are they going to get that money? On the other hand, you're like,
nah, that's
they're giving
nothing.
out billions left and right.
Yeah,
I mean, like, it's nothing when it's, for rich people or for the military industrial complex. And I mean, again, does anyone really think that this state of affairs would last if this was happening in McLean, Virginia, for example, one of the wealthiest zip codes in the entire country? Oh. Of course it wouldn't be it would be treated as an emergency. It would be an emergency. It would be handled like an emergency, and it'd be fixed like that. Forget about it.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, I have nothing to add to that. This is a shame. And I always said it, you know this. I don't even like the idea of, like, let's update our infrastructure, and that's really what this watered down infrastructure bill that just passed not too long ago. That is what you're talking about.
Inadequate that ultimately is.
Whatever happened to this notion of, like, forget updating it. Why don't we actively try to make our infrastructure number one in the world and make it the envy of the rest of the world? Why are we not talking about high-speed rail everywhere? Why are we not talking about making our airports state-of-the-art and better than anywhere else? I mean, you've told me you've traveled to the Middle East sometimes and you're in, like, Dubai or some shit, and you're like, Jesus Christ, this doesn't even feel like an airport. You fly out of LaGuardia in New York and you're like, am I in a third world country? This is fucking crazy.
Totally true.
Yeah, so I don't understand what happened to that. We need that attitude back, that attitude of, like, I don't just want to fix it. I want to make it the best in the world.
It's because, for
neoliberalism.
Example, rebuilding water systems and, wastewater treatment plants is not super highly profitable. So it doesn't get done. Right. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Since we've outsourced everything, we've, like, stripped our government of any sort of capacity. And we've told our people that, like, forget about having any sort of political imagination. Nothing's possible. Everything's gridlock. There's no way we could get anything done. That's how you end up with this situation where the only things that get built and done are those that companies think that they can cash in on. And I guess they didn't see a profit to be made in Jackson, Mississippi, or actually it was the profit that led to the problems in Flint, Michigan.
All right, guys, what you just saw is a little teaser clip from Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. You can check out the entire podcast. It was an awesome conversation with Professor Vivek Chibber, and he is brilliant. He's a socialism expert, and he gets really into detail with us. And if you want to check out the entire podcast, go ahead and sign up on Substack, and you pay $5 a month, and you get the video of all of the podcasts, and you get them a day early. You also get our newsletters. For everybody else, if you want, you can listen for free to the audio podcast version. But remember, we take zero ad dollars for this podcast. Never had a conversation with an advertiser our entire time doing it. Very proud of that fact. It's all because of the people on Substack who support us. So thank you to everybody who already does support us. And if you don't, please consider it. Love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. If you want to see me and Krystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Krystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take zero ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.